Hello, my name is Julia Widdop and I'm an interviewer for What Should I Be? If you'd like to get more information on What Should I Be, please visit our website at whatshouldibe.me. We provide complete and free access to a wide variety of interviews spanning many different careers from all over the world. Today I'm speaking with Michael Ray Smith, and Michael is a communications professor at the Campbell University in North Carolina. So, Michael, could you tell us a little bit about what a professor does, and specifically a communications professor?
Well, thank you for having me on your program. A communication professor and a professor in general. Well, the funny thing is, when you become a professor in higher education, one of the first hurdles is you have to get a Ph.D., which is a research degree. And so you spend an enormous amount of time becoming a researcher so you can go in the classroom and be a teacher. And sometimes you don't get an opportunity to do the research that you trained so hard to do, but nonetheless you try to blend both of those ideas into one pursuit. So you, a teacher in higher education is somebody obviously that educates, tries to bring a lot of study to the field, and a communication professor specifically tries to help people understand this thing that we all do all the time, but it gets very complicated. One of the truisms I use in the classroom is the only thing for sure we know about communication is we tend to get it wrong. The most likely outcome of any communication encounter is misunderstanding. It's very complicated. It's very difficult. So we talk about what you and I are doing, that type of communication. We talk about small group communication, and we spend a lot of time talking about what we call mass media and mass communication, and we help people learn how to do what you're doing interviews, using online tools, using newspapers, magazines, even old school radio and electronic broadcasting to disseminate messages.
Okay.
And that's it in a couple of words.
And so the major thing you emphasize is to clarity, I would assume.
Yeah, fidelity of the message is important. We also try to be sensitive that we say you are the message. So when you speak, when you present a message, you are presenting it from all the things that you're familiar with. We call it your own private logic. But you have to work really hard to realize that other people do not share your private logic. So when you have a communication encounter, even if you and I, we're from different parts of the country. I'm from the East Coast. You're from further west. There are some cultural understandings that we would assume that we share, but we need to, just really be sensitive that we all come at it from different points of view.
Yeah. And you've been a professor for 22 years?
That's right, yes.
So,
makes me sound very old.
How old were you when you decided to become a professor?
Let's see, I started in the newsroom about around 25 years old, and I worked in different newsrooms, particularly in Pennsylvania. I worked for a newsroom called Gannett, which owns USA Today, and a few family-owned papers for about 10 years. So that put me about 35. And in that period, I was going to graduate school in Pennsylvania, Shippensburg University, not too far from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This, by the way, is the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, coming up in a few weeks. And then, so I started probably in the classroom in my late 30s, and then taught at a lot of different schools, state schools, private schools, Christian schools. And I'm at a Baptist school. We're the second leading Baptist university in the nation, actually the world. Baylor and Waco, Texas is number one, and then we're number two.
Okay, so so it took you how many years of education to get to that position you're at now?
Well, you can, communication is one of those rare fields that we do accept professional experience. Typically you're not eligible for tenure, which means a lot of different things at a lot of universities, but if you're a high quality filmmaker, you'll probably be invited to come be a full-time professor. It really depends on how much experience and how much breadth and depth you have in it. But typically, it takes 7 years of graduate education beyond the master's degree.
Beyond the master's.
Beyond the master's degree. And so, yeah, it's a big time commitment. There are people. I have a colleague who finished his training. He did his study in the classroom. We call that residential study. It went about 2 years, and then he was able to do his dissertation in less than 2 years. I think that's fairly rare. And the reason is, most people that go into higher education or at the graduate level, a lot are mid-career people, and they have families, and so they have to make a living, and they're taking classes part-time. That was my experience until I was required to do what's called the residential part of it, where you go full-time. So my experience is a little bit unusual. It took me a long time, but some people can do it faster. I actually preferred the way I did it. I was able to incorporate what I was learning on the graduate level with my undergraduates, and I think it made me a better teacher as I grew in my understanding and maturity about the field.
Okay.
I don't recommend it. It takes longer.
Sounds like it's not a typical thing a young person just starts out of high school to be.
Well, I think you're right. I think that if you look at the the biographies of not necessarily people like me, but leading thinkers through history, you'll see that their sojourn is very twisty and windy. And they start here. They start out to be a diplomat, and then they become a physician, and then next thing you know, they're a writer, and they end up in philosophy. So it's really hard to say, this is what I want to do. Although I do have students in the classroom today who say, my ambition is to be a university teacher. So yeah, okay. There are people that say that. And by the way, it is possible to go to undergraduate school, do well, earn a master's degree, do well, and then earn your Ph.D. in a short amount of time. So there are people with Ph.D.s and they're 26 years old. So it's possible.
It's possible. Okay. And they could also perhaps be an associate professor or something like that while they're...
Yeah, typically we have a series of ranks, and they're hard to understand. If you're a part-time teacher, we call you an adjunct professor, and you get paid a part-time salary. And most universities, it's about $3,000 for a 3-credit class. And then if you were invited to become a full-time professor, but you don't have a Ph.D., you'll probably be what's called a lecturer. And then if you negotiate it, perhaps you'll become a professional in residence, and then that's a different rank. But the more likely situation is you earn a Ph.D. and you start in, your first rank would be an assistant professor, and then after you've proved yourself a bit, you typically have to write a certain number of journal articles and have certain quality in your teaching evaluations. You become an associate. If you write more, you publish more, and your evaluations are good enough, you become a full professor. And that's the top. Full professor is the top.
And what sort of person would typically do well in this field? Why were you drawn to it?
Well, most of us in the academy are a bit eccentric, and so that drives a lot of what we do. Sometimes we think it's a bit vain, but sometimes we think, oh my goodness, I can do this so much better than these others. So, give me a stage so I can strut. In other cases, it's the joy of interacting and having those moments in the classroom where you connect and you engage, and you think, is there anything better? No one likes to be laughed at, but it's always enjoyable to laugh with others. So if you can have a class, enjoy the moment, not just a country club moment, but to enjoy the moment that we're on a journey of discovery, and we're sharing some vistas together, and it is great fun. It's great fun when it works out. And it's hard though. There are plenty of people, even in university, that will let you know that they don't feel that this is very relevant or very exciting or in other ways helpful to them. So you got to work doubly hard to try to take those people and make them see what we think is the benefit.
Right. Okay. What is it you like most about this field?
Well, there's a movie called Tenure. I think it came out in 2008, and Luke Wilson stars in it, and he plays a professor who is mid career, and he's up for tenure. And it's a humorous account of what happens in the classroom, but he did something that I find I vicariously enjoyed the moment through him, and that is he had a class. He's an English professor, which is, just slightly different from what I do. And so he's talking about novels and short stories, and you can see that the class they're okay with it, but they're not real excited. And you can see he's swinging for the fence. And then after a while, somebody responds, and then somebody else responds. And then through that, a little fever comes through, and he tells a new professor, the thing that you have to do as a professor is engage the students. And it's an art. It's an art because what you did last class may not work this class, and the topic may be different, and the maybe you're introducing something that's a building block lesson, and now you're getting to something that's much more abstract, and the strategy you used yesterday doesn't work. So you have to think on your feet and be very nimble, and that's exciting. It's exciting when you try it and it works, and it's also obviously not as exciting when you try it and you think, wow, I put so much prep in that for preparation, and we call them preps when we prepare a class, and it didn't go anywhere. So it's hard to know, and we used humor. Most professors try to use humor. And the things that we think are so devastatingly funny, students will turn their nose up to sometimes. So the target moves all the time, and that I think makes it enjoyable because you're pushing yourself constantly to be a better professor.
Yeah, and be a better communicator.
A better communicator. That's exactly right.
Well, what was the most difficult and challenging things that you face? I guess that's probably one of them, but are there others?
Let's see. There are quite a few. When you think, and this is a hard thing for my students to get, they all stay the same age from year to year to year, and I keep aging. So I went from being slightly older to now I'm like a big brother. Then I became a dad. Now I'm their granddad. And so, typically they would look at a guy like me and say, you're irrelevant to my life, particularly in terms of communication and all the things that are happening online. So the hardest thing for me is to put my mind into that seat in the classroom and try to see the content through their eyes and realize that this generation, we call millennials, are different. They are wired very differently than I am. And the old school thing of walking in and having somebody say, oh my gosh, there's the professor. Oh yes, he wrote some books. Really? Yeah. How many? Oh, he's written 5 books. And that doesn't happen anymore. I have to impress them every time we meet. And they really do not care that I published or that I speak or that I'm doing this interview with you. They do not care. I have to figure out what is relevant to them and then try to serve it back to them. So, and I there are days when I don't do it successfully and I am disappointed, but it helps. It really is a great thing to keep you challenged. If you're a person that really likes challenge, the classroom and a university is the place for you. So the number one thing is trying to keep it relevant.
Are there a lot of journalism students or communication students who are planning to be bloggers? Because it seems to be that's the new journalism.
Yes. Well, we do have a fair amount of people that would come into my classroom and any other communication classroom across the nation and say, yeah, I know this, I can do this. So, and that's a hard thing. All of us confront that. If it seems familiar, then we know how to do it. But what you don't realize is you have to pull the curtain back and say, there is a lot more to this than you understand. So yeah, we do have people that are bloggers, and we have people that do not necessarily think that they need advanced training. Here's one of the things I try to tell people who are interested in blogging is that you need to understand that most people are really not that interested in your opinion. And I know that's a hard lesson to learn. But in all the different newsrooms I worked across my 10-year full-time career, we hardly let reporters write opinion pieces for two reasons. One, we didn't want the readers to think that we were unduly biased on something.
Right.
And two, guess what? It takes an enormous amount of effort to write in a detached way and to have a sense of neutrality. It's a hard thing. I mean, and some of my colleagues would say it's an impossible thing, right? But you still try. You still try to do that. So we have to try to teach bloggers or unlearn some of the bad bad habits they have, so that they'll be a better writer and communicator. But quite frankly, most of my students are interested in what we call public relations. And this may surprise you that most of my students are women. So we have a fair number of women who are attracted to public relations, and they're interested in persuasive messages, which is what a blogger tends to do.
So they're not interested in being objective.
Right. And so we have to show them how the best public relations people are the ones that have learned how to think like a reporter and write like a reporter and attack a story like a reporter. Now, if you do all that, you're gonna be great in public relations, but it's not easy. I mean, it just by saying, hey, you need to think like a reporter, that doesn't make you think like a reporter. You have to go through all the planning that a reporter goes through and go through all the hard work of preparing questions, and then even when a source says something that you think is outrageous, to try to present an affect. Let your face be somewhat blank so you're not pushing the story in a direction you don't want it to go. These are hard things to learn. But we're finding, matter of fact, let me just tell you a quick story, if I may. Mm-hmm. Melinda Jackson is in LA. She was in our program at Campbell University, just graduated a couple years ago. And she went to Los Angeles without a plan. She went to Los Angeles with some gift cards she got for graduation. I guess she had her car. And so she shows up. She did talk to somebody about an internship before she got there. Well, now she's working in publicity, and she works for a company that has offices in a couple of places around the world. And she said just the other day, it was her training in journalism that helps her think like a reporter. So when she pitches a story as a publicist, she knows which ones will gain traction and which ones they need to think about a different angle. So I was really pleased. She just came to Campbell a couple weeks ago to speak, and then a public relations outfit did a feature story on her, and she repeated the same thing. I'm offering this as one of my students, but she's the one that reported this back. So I think the skills are very valuable skills.
And how many people do you emphasize the aspect of being a fifth branch of government and keeping those guys in check?
Yes, we think it's very important. It's because the press is everywhere. It's like we're fish and we're in the water, and so we're not aware. Oh, there's water. Yeah, what is water? We don't know. It's everywhere. We're bombarded with messages, whether they're commercial or news messages, and so we think it's so important that somebody is making our government accountable. And guess what? We are newspapers, the bigger newspapers, the metro papers are closing, the community newspapers are doing very well, and we have plenty of websites that serve up information to readers. But that most important First Amendment responsibility is not necessarily being nurtured like it once was. And if we ever get to the place that everybody's working for somebody, that is to say, it looks like news, it smells like news, but it's actually public relations, and that's all we're getting, then our country could be in jeopardy.
And
The
it
First
seems like
Amendment.
we're close to that now. Like many of the major news groups are propaganda machines.
Well, there certainly is a little more uh, value. You're aware of the values, you're aware of the opinion. We call it a European model, where the part of the story is what you think about it. But there is a need still to try, we call it fact-driven journalism. We used to use the concept of objectivity, and that's fallen out of favor lately. But the concept is the same. If you have some built-in understanding of fairness, and we get this from kindergarten, this is one of the concepts that worldwide people seem to have an understanding of what does it mean to be fair. So now you go and you tell your story, you present that information. When the reader is finished, when the viewer is finished, when the listener is finished, he or she should say, okay, I don't quite agree with how they presented that information, but I feel like I've got a smattering of both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we still want that. And you're right. We are in fearful times, and which is, again, more exciting for me and my colleagues, because we feel like it's not just walking into a classroom and, hey, let's just have another class. We feel like we're on a mission.
Yes. And I think the bloggers are really, they could be cutting edge.
Yeah, bloggers, as you know, have had some good success with telling the story before even the mainstream press do it. I would offer quickly that there are people that have some access to information, but it's a little bit like when I become a private investigator and I'm not trained versus the police. It's so much better when you have somebody that's trained, that doesn't want to tamper with the evidence, that knows a certain protocol and things that do it better. So I would never say bloggers are in any way superior to our reporters. People who are trained. You don't need to pass a test to be a journalist in the United States. We are protected by the Constitution. It's one of the few businesses, well, actually the only business, that's mentioned in the Constitution. Congress shall make no law regarding the powers.
Oh, well, I think bloggers should be trained.
Right, that's right. And yes, I agree. And I don't want to see it mandated. I don't want to see somebody pass a law that says you have to, yes. But I do think there's benefit in understanding that just because you heard it through a friend, that doesn't make it legitimate. We have to work very hard to source our information. Source means check it out, talk to somebody. And we typically encourage people to talk to official sources. We say those are the people that are paid to talk to us, and unofficial sources, the people that just seem like they know a lot of information. And you put the two together and you work very hard to get high quality sources. You do all that. It may not be the most exciting story, but it's going to be a story that when the day is done, you've done your best. You've done due diligence. And we all appreciate anyone that does due diligence.
Yes. I have a bachelor's in journalism, so I truly believe that that's the most important thing journalists or bloggers do, is that keeping everything in check by going down the middle.
As best as possible. Some people call it the posture of neutrality, but you in your own heart know if you're pushing the story one way or the other. And the better journalists, quite frankly, know how to select the information so that when the reader or the viewer or the listener is finished, she has a certain sense that this is what the reporter thought. So, there are ways to skew it, but I think if you're trying to do your job and you're covering something that you don't personally endorse, when that original source reads it, he or she should not realize that you did not agree. Now, by the way, I should say that there's different models in journalism, and there are plenty of, particularly in the magazines that have opinion in there, that would say, you got to let your reader know that you are not in favor of this. So that's one position. And again, the European model. And then the more mainstream approach is be detached.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that's how I was trained, so that's how I think it should be. um, what are some tips or suggestions you could share with someone who's thinking about becoming a professor in general?
Well, I think all of us would profit from shadowing somebody who's a professor. And, most professors would be very flattered if a student, I'm thinking it's a student, might be a mid-career person, says, hey, could I just walk around with you one day and see how you do it? And that would help. I think all of us have a romantic view about different occupations, and we forget that there's the public face and then there's the routine, the tedious thing. I think if a person who is interested in higher ed would spend some time with a professor, he or she would learn how much grading is involved. And that's in very important work. So you have to spend time in isolation reviewing somebody else's work. Then you have to figure out in a supportive, encouraging way how to tell the student, here's where you need to improve. And the millennials are not that great about taking criticism. This generation has been taught that everybody gets a trophy, and everybody's got a good opinion, and everybody is above average. We're all from Lake Wobegon. Well, you know what? You still can profit. I can profit. I have people read my prose, and thank God for it. I still am thankful for good editors. Mm-hmm. So we all need to grow. And so but I'm just saying, a professor has to figure out a way to talk to people, write on their papers or whatever they do, the films or the online work, somehow do an evaluation that is not unduly alarming. So number one, shadow a professor. Number two, try to see what a professor does when he or she is not teaching. Number three, check out their schedule. We do have a very flexible schedule, but in many ways, you're never done, because if you're not in the classroom, you're supposed to be doing research. And if you're not doing research, you're supposed to be giving back to the community. So meanwhile, you got to get a haircut, make sure you're taking care of your family, walk the dog, get some exercise. I mean, it's a great life. It's the best life, but it also is a demanding life. So those are, some things you need to be aware of when you think about it.
Tell us a little bit about the routine aspects. What's a typical day or week like?
Okay, so we'll take a beginning, middle, and end. Before a class begins, you would prepare a syllabus. And so this is all done in the abstract. You get a calendar out and you think to yourself, okay, here are some milestones. We're going to have some assignments along the way. You have to do this reading along the way. And then you want to build in a little flexibility, because somebody's coming to town that you don't know is coming to town, and maybe you want that person to speak to your class, you want the class to go, and so, all right, so you build that thing, and you hope that you're going to have enough of the things that people can count on, because there are plenty of people that get out their date books and their timers, their day timers, and they'll write in everything that's due, and they don't want any changes on that. Like if it's due that day, you can't push it up for sure. If you push it back, maybe that's okay, but they want to know. All right, so you do that. And now you walk into the classroom. Before you even walk in there, you've read everything. You've looked at all the films. You've been exposed to all this. And so you have to pace yourself. You have to, again, think, here's a person who probably signed up for the class because it's a good time. It's 10 o'clock, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's not because it's your class. It's not because of the content. The class just worked in his or her schedule. Okay, so, you're thinking, you talk to them a little bit about what's expected in the class, and maybe they're enchanted, maybe they're not. So then, so now let me just tell you, okay, we've had the first class, but but now let's work into the middle of the semester and how it goes. So typically you do your class. You might have, we try to, or at least I try to have a variety. So you'll have some kind of lecture, some kind of activity, some kind of interaction with the students. We call it, small group work or what. And if possible, you want to have every class have some fun things so that when they leave, they'll say, well, that was fun. And it's, like I said, sometimes it backfires. So then they leave, mostly. A lot of times people hang back and they want to talk to you about something that is on their mind. Okay, so you deal with that. Now you're back in your office. And typically I have a sweetheart schedule. I have a Monday evening meeting with the newspaper staff, and then I have classes Tuesday, Thursday, no class Friday, and then I have we have what's called a freshman seminar, which is taught 1 hour in my case on a Wednesday. So Tuesday, Thursday, it's back to back, boom, 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 boom. I'm very busy, and on those other days, I am in my office doing preparation, answering email every day. By the way, I begin every day, probably for 2 hours. Email with students, email with professors, email with colleagues across the country, people such as yourself. So that takes a couple hours, and it's delightful duty. It's no problem, but it is something that you need to do. And then throughout those days, particularly the days you're not having the intense classroom experience, you're getting ready. So, and this is important. A student doesn't care that you had a car problem and it took you 5 hours away from the things that you were going to do that day. When you step in that classroom, you better be ready. You better have read the assignment that you gave them, and you better be able to be the maitre d' and say, hey, come on over here. Here's a good table. In other words, here are the things that are, I think, of interest and will benefit you. Because if you don't, they will find out very quickly, and you're a bum. And you can only be a bum so many times before they'll turn on you. So, and they are our students. Even now, I'm in the sunny South, where people tend to be a little more polite. But I've worked in the Northeast, and I worked in Indiana, Midwest. Students are really quite polite, and I think they will give you the benefit of the doubt. They want a sense. You've heard the old line: they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So as long as you communicate goodwill and, hey, I'm on your side, I am your advocate, I want to help you, they will forgive you for that occasional you're late or, oh, you didn't return their papers. But I would encourage any new professor, return assignments immediately. That's so important for a student. So then the typical day ends, like any other day. You're exhausted. Really, you really are. You after teaching all day, you lose your voice sometimes. You're drained, and you go home, and most of the time, you have some war stories to tell. Something happened today. Somebody didn't realize what a lion I am in the classroom, and what a intellectual giant I am. And yeah, they don't. So you lick your wounds and try better the next time.
I hope you don't have an asthma attack like I just
did.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Okay, so are there any other excuse me, any other suggestions you have for people who are considering this field?
Well, my daughter was a ballerina, and she decided she was going to be a French major. So she's very good. She's bilingual, and she's going to study in France, in Paris, this fall. And so she's going to teach her first class she's going to teach English, but she's going to be teaching in Paris. So we were talking the other day, and she said, I really have never taught. I've done, she taught a little ballet, and she's been in a couple of classrooms. So, that's an alarming issue if you think, yeah, I want to do this, and you have never done it. So I guess my tip would be, and this is my tip for life, anything you want to do that you want to get paid for, do it for free. So I tell people, oh, you want to write? Go write for free. What do you mean write for free? Hey, guess what? Your house of worship wants to put out a publication. Do it for them.
Yeah.
You have a charity, they will gladly say, yeah, help us. Most people need public relations help. Go write for them. Anyway, so I'd say the same for the teacher. You could start at your church or your synagogue or place of worship. Just say, could I work here as a teacher? Show me the curriculum and let me have a swing at it. I'm not kidding. I spent many years as a Sunday school teacher, and I made a lot of those mistakes so that by the time I got into the classroom, I knew some things that didn't work. That the standing up in front of a group, reading is death. Okay,
Yeah.
Don't do that. All right, but what else can you do with that material to engage people? And so you can practice for free, and you can do a service for somebody. So I would say, yeah, try it somewhere for free. Also, try to figure out if this is going to be unsettling for you. I have some of my students now have, I've been doing this long enough that they're teachers, and they'll tell me how different it is to stand in front of a group and realize they're all looking at you, and you're the teacher. And so now, you would think most people would enjoy that responsibility and that power, but it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. So I guess I would say, not only do it for free, but up the ante sometimes. Like when possible, become a guest speaker in a class and see how daunting it will be if you walk out of there and go, oh my gosh, I just lost 5 pounds in water weight. Maybe this is not for you. So, and keep in mind that the Academy, it attracts people who are researchers. I mentioned earlier that we make people get a research degree, and then we put them in the classroom and we dare them to do any research because you don't have time. Okay. So the people that tend to be the best researchers are people that enjoy isolation. And when they're around other people, that drains them. So, oh my goodness. Now you need to figure out, how are you going to manage the two dynamics? Are you going to be able to be a high quality researcher and a teacher? Or are you going to be basically a great teacher and you're not going to be much of a researcher? Or can you do both? And so that's, so you see how challenging this can be? And we expect people to do all of it. And by the way, you better have some kind of family life or some kind of second identity. If all you did was come to class and sleep in your office,
that's not a life.
Yeah, and it's that would not be a good thing. So you follow it. It is, but let me quickly say that it is a big honor to be an educator. It's a big honor to be able to share with people your own age and people that are younger, and sometimes people that are older, things that you find exciting. So I would say, try it, even if you have some volunteer experience or maybe the occasional guest speaking experience and you find it not as comfortable. Don't give up. You still may be the person that touches this generation in a special way.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. It's a real honor. Thank you.